We all have dark periods in our lives. We all face difficulties that seem insurmountable. We all encounter setbacks. And when we do, we're often tempted to throw in the towel. Most philosophers have tried to help us to reduce the amount that we suffer. They've offered consoling advice on how to make the pain go away. But there was one philosopher with a far more bracing take on the subject. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that all varieties of suffering and failure were to be welcomed by anyone seeking happiness. We should regard them as tough challenges to be overcome, in the same way as a climber might tackle a mountain. Almost alone among philosophers, he thought it was an advantage to have serious reversals in life. He wrote, "To those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill-treatment, indignities, profound self-contempt, the torture of self-mistrust, and the wretchedness of the vanquished." And to understand what Nietzsche meant, it helps to scale one of his favorite mountains, Pitzkorvatsch, high in the Swiss Alps.
I'm now standing on the top of Pitzkorvatsch, and the view is extraordinary, sublime. There's a complete stillness in the air. Clouds are just drifting over us. We can see clouds below us, and then through the clouds, villages and forests. You feel like you're on the top of the world, and the air is curiously light, and you feel a kind of elated feeling. And I think that here we can start to understand why Nietzsche placed such an emphasis on the tops of mountains. It's at the very top of the mountain that come the finest views, but it's of course extremely hard to get to them. And this is symptomatic of his view that to reach anything that's worthwhile, to reach anything that's valuable, you have to go through an extraordinary amount of effort.
Friedrich Nietzsche certainly knew a lot about effort, both physical and mental. His life was one of exceptional hardship. He constantly struggled against illness, dizziness, headaches, vomiting, probably all symptoms of the syphilis he picked up in a Cologne brothel as a student. He was forced on a restless journey around Europe in search of somewhere where the climate wouldn't upset his delicate constitution. And the place that best agreed with him was Sils Maria, high in the mountains in the southeastern corner of Switzerland. Nietzsche came here for the first time in June 1879 and immediately fell in love with the place. "I now have Europe's best and mightiest air to breathe," he wrote. "Its nature is akin to my own." He spent 8 summers in Sils Maria, living in this barely furnished room rented from a farmer. It was here that he worked on some of his most important books, including Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, and Twilight of the Idols. But his work enjoyed little success in his lifetime. Although he'd been made a professor by the age of 24, he was completely out of tune with his colleagues and was finally forced to retire at the age of 35. For the rest of his life, he had very little money, and the many books he worked on here went largely unread. He lived a life of routine. He would rise at 5 in the morning, right until midday, and then take walks up the huge peaks that necklace the village. But he didn't just live amongst the mountains for the air and the nice views. The landscape he saw around him spoke to his deepest sense of himself and his work. Philosophy, he declared, is a voluntary living in ice and high mountains. Nietzsche's love life was as disastrous as his professional career. All his attempts to seduce women were in vain. Many were frightened by his large moustache, and he confessed to feelings of appalling loneliness. He wrote to a married friend, "Thanks to your wife, things are 100 times better for you than for me. You have a nest together. I have, at best, a cave." Nietzsche immersed himself in philosophy, but his working life was cruelly cut short. He ended his days in madness, having famously broken down and embraced a horse in Turin in 1889. He returned to his boarding house, danced naked, thought of shooting the Kaiser, and believed himself to be, amongst others, Jesus, Napoleon, Buddha, the King of Piedmont, and Alexander the Great. He was bundled into a train to Germany and put into an asylum, where he was looked after by his sister and his elderly mother until he died 11 years later at the age of 56. A key lesson that Nietzsche's life of hardship taught him was that any worthwhile achievement was born out of constant struggle and hard work. Though we sometimes suppose that success comes easily and naturally to some people, there was no such thing as a straight path to the top in Nietzsche's eyes. "Don't talk about giftedness or inborn talents," he wrote. "One can name all kinds of very great people who were not very gifted. They acquired greatness, they became geniuses. And they did so by overcoming difficulties." It's a lesson that the ballerina exemplifies. Monica Perego is a principal dancer with the English National Ballet.
It takes a lot of work, also dedication. It's a job that you do for love, really. And basically it's just a lot of practicing the same step over and over again till you get it right, and you make it seem effortless. And a lot of pain in the body, of course, because it's a lot of strain for the muscles. And pain on the feet, obviously, because you've got these lovely pointers on, which look really nice, but they're quite painful sometimes.
How much does it hurt? I mean, it's hard to imagine.
Well, it depends. You go through phases, really, but you do get a lot of blisters, and you do get aches and pains all the time.
All the time?
Oh, yeah, pretty much, especially backs and, I mean, it's personal, but backs and calves, and that's the worst. And, of course, blister on the toes, and, you know, yellow nails. They sound disgusting.
What's a yellow nail?
Well, basically bruised nails.
Right, bruised toenails.
So, yeah.
And do they bleed as well? Do your feet ever bleed?
Well, yeah, just with blisters. I had actually 2 toenails coming off as well.
Goodness me.
And for example, just we were at the Royal Albert Hall in June, and I've been off sick for a while, and I had to come back and go straight into Swan Lake rehearsal. And so my feet weren't used to it. So I had about 10 blisters on my toes, and I had to perform, you know, with like blood and, you know, loads of paddings, and try to not to feel the pain. But of course you always feel it.
Nietzsche said that without pain, without going through pain, there could never be any gain, and that anything that's worthwhile doing in life is going to take you through some awful things. Do you think that's right?
It's right in our career, for sure. Definitely, because it is so straining. But the satisfaction at the end of the performance, or at the end of someone's career, it's so amazing that no aches and pain will, you know, take that amazement away from it, you know.
The pain was worth it.
Oh yes, definitely.